Man.
She's both owner and member of the bookstore.
Yeah.
Of the book world.
So what does that mean exactly?
It means I'm a reader who owns a bookstore. And, basically we want to have, it's exactly what she said. We read, we love books. What I love about this job is matching, it can be a kid or a grown up with a book that I know they're going to love. And that's...
I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a challenge. You're going to trust me. You're going to love the ones I recommended for you. You're going to come back.
How do you do that? How do you match a person?
You listen. We've been doing this a long time.
So you can kind of.
So you listen. You say, okay. You like with a kid, because sometimes you have to pull it out of kids. You say, what's the last book you read that you really liked? And they'll tell you and say, okay, do you want something funny? And some kids know exactly. I want a book like Artemis Fowl. And you sort of go through your mind. Okay, what's like Artemis Fowl? Who is a character like that? Are they going for the humor of that book? Or are they going more for the fantasy plot? And then you just recommend a couple. And I always walk away. I just give them a little stack and I walk away. And I let them decide. And I also tell kids, go to the library. Don't get it here. Go to the library if it's only out in hardcover. I want you to like it. I want everyone to have a really good experience here. And if that means waiting until they buy a hardcover, until they know they like it, because kids will read books over and over and over again. Don't buy it first. Read it first. Borrow it from your teacher and then come back and see. And that puts people at ease, because it's like, I don't want to sell you a book. I want you to enjoy a book. And that's what's different about independent bookstores.
Do you think there's couple questions. First of all, do you think there's a danger in having these big box stores out there that are only stocking books that they're selling?
Well, the danger with box stores is, and this is something that people don't get, is the buyer for Borders or Barnes & Noble has enormous power. And if that person said, and this happened a couple of years ago, I really want to carry middle grade fiction with photos of real kids on the cover, well, all of a sudden, 3 years ago, all the books had photos of kids on covers, because that's pretty much what he was demanding. So what happens is you have one or two people who are exercising, by the virtue of their own job, enormous editorial control over the content that we're all now able to read, because that has a direct effect on the publishers, because they'll say, I was at a book meeting last week, independent bookstores account for 10% of book sales. That's it. So we're competing now with the Costco, with the supermarket, with Borders, with Barnes & Noble, with online. So our opinion, while important, is becoming less and less significant, because we don't represent a large enough market share to really sway someone. But if someone asked me, should we have photographs of kids on covers, I'd say absolutely not, because kids hate it. Because they don't like it, because it's telegraphing to the kid what the character looks like. And often that's not what Harry Potter didn't look anything, when I started reading it, like what that Radcliffe guy looks like. But now I can't get those movie guys out of my head. And that's what happens. And kids don't like that. But those people have enormous power. And they're making some pretty big decisions that affect, a publisher will change the title of a book, because the Borders or Barnes & Noble person said, I don't like that title, I won't carry it. But if you change it, I will. Stuff like that happens all the time. And that's the real danger. I know, you're raising your hand. It's true. And that's the real danger of the big box stores. Frankly, if people are going to buy books, great. Buy books. There are some people who don't have an independent bookstore near them. Go to Borders. I want you to read. I want you to be happy. But I don't want one or two people deciding what's getting published because they don't like a particular book.
Have you seen a rise with marketing and with big, publishers utilizing new media,
They're trying to utilize it. They're trying to get kids to sign up for email blasts, to sign up for, what's her name? Stephanie Meyer she's really good at reaching out to kids, and that's all funded by the publisher. And they're trying different ways to get a hold of different people, and if you're in an adult book group, you can go to the websites for all the different publishers, and you can get reading book guides right there. So they're trying to make it easy for just about anybody to access information about the book that they want to read. And that they're going to do more. I'm not quite sure how it's evolving, because some publishers haven't quite, it's a slow process. But definitely I see more people using the web.
Do you think there's such thing as a bad book?
Sure there is.
Do you think there's a danger in writing or kids reading bad books?
No. I mean, if it's the only kind of book you're reading, maybe. If you're reading books where the message is people don't need to be valued, it's okay to be misogynistic, it's okay to be prejudiced, it's okay to be cruel, that's probably not really good for you. But what most kids do is they read a little of this, a little of that, a lot of one thing, and then they mix it up a little. You know, and for the most part, I haven't seen any kid get scarred by a book that they've read. I mean, I read, you know, every Judy Blume book under the sun when it first came out, and some of those were considered scandalous. Now, I was in 7th grade, they banned Forever in my junior high school library. We couldn't write a book report about it because it talked about sex in a way that no other book had up until that point for kids. Was that a bad book? Some parents would say, yes, it was a horrible book. We loved it. You know, and looking back on it now, it's a fine book. People think Twilight books there's a real sort of catch-22 about the Twilight books because girls far younger than the intended audience are reading them. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Is it sexualizing kids too soon? I don't know. I think TV is doing more of that than anything else because kids are really good at self-selecting books, and also content within books. And some kids are like, they had sex? Really? You know, so things are going over kids' heads because they're not really ready for it yet. So, you know, would I like kids to read great books all the time? Sure, but we all read, you know, sort of junky books when we were kids. I read horror, lots of horror books that we don't even stock here. And I loved them, you know, so I think it's okay. As long as there's a mix. I think there just needs to be a mix.
Do you think that, as a bookseller, do you find, you mentioned before how people are often coming in with these reviews, they're going online, they're reading, they're finding out tons of stuff about the book before they buy the book. Do you think that there's been a trend in people not having as much confidence in picking out their own book?
Yes, very much so. And I think part of it is they're in a book group. And the book group exerts, you know, you've got however many people, 8 to 15 people in your book group, and you pick out a book, and everyone hates the book. Well, you're now like the schmuck who picked the bad book. And people do. They want to, I think partly it's a time thing. They don't want to take the time to really find out, well, is this a good book or not? And and they're so used to having everything sort of answered for them with everything else. You know, is this a good car insurance? Boom, on the internet you can find out in 2 seconds. Should I buy this car? Yes or no? Excuse me. And people do. They get sort of spooked. It's like they pick one bad book and they think suddenly they lose their confidence. I'm like, no, what kind of book do you like? What kind of author do you like to read? Well, you're fine, you know. And a lot of people come to independence because it's called hand selling. It's when I literally hand you a book. I'm hand selling. And they're expecting that from us. And that's what we do. That's what we do every day. And when you go to a big box store, they don't do that. So you kind of, you kind of have to fend for yourself. And I guess we sort of maybe enabled some customers because we're like, no, read that. It's going to be great. And we're almost always right. You know, I mean, every once in a while we'll just totally mess with somebody. But that's a rare occurrence. And then it becomes something funny. It's like, oh, I picked one bad book in 12 years. You know, and but people they are a little less confident. Kids, no problem. Kids don't agonize about books. Every once in a while a kid will agonize, but in general, they come in with a very clear sense of what they want. And usually they know exactly what author they want, which is kind of cool.
Have you found a trend in, I know for me personally, when I was a kid, I fell in love with a story. I never cared about the author. I could give, you know, whatever. Right. But ever since the dawn of Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling, I've seen kind of a much bigger attachment to the author and the story.
It's an attachment to the author because you love the story. So people love J.K. Rowling because she is Harry Potter. You know, if J.K. Rowling, I mean, that new book she came out with, The Tale of the Beetleborg, didn't do so well because everyone's like, that's not really Harry Potter. It's like a Harry Potter ripoff, kind of. And it's for much, much younger kids. But they identify with a certain author because they know the book is going to be consistently good. And they're savvy shoppers. They don't have a ton of time. These kids have a lot of homework. Books are competing for their attention with so many other things. It's like, I know I like J.K. Rowling books. And kids will come in and say, what do you have that's like J.K. Rowling? What do you have that's like Stephanie Meyer? So you know immediately what sort of book they're in the mood for. When I was a kid, I was into authors, though. You know, I was into Mrs. Pigglewiggle, Louise Fitzhugh, all those, Nancy Drew, but she wasn't an author, but all those series. I mean, they were series books, but they weren't as commercially trumpeted as series books now as things are. I mean, today it's like, last summer you couldn't get, what's that phrase? You couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting some Harry Potter promotion for the last book. And they inundate in a way that they didn't used to with advertising for books.
Definitely. I think wait, one more thing.
Yes.
Your favorite book?
It changes. Probably my
early favorite book, and how in that book, whatever you